organization, Boston University, Scott Solberg, who you will hear from today, Chad D'Entremont from the Rennie Center for Education Research and Policy, and Mass Inc., Ben Foreman, are all principal investigators for our project, as well as close collaboration with the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which is in collaboration with Carrie Conaway, their research director, as well. We are also sponsored by a $1 million grant from the Institute for Educational Sciences, as well as supported by the work of the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability. So just a few notes for our webinar today. There is not a phone line for the audience. If you have any technical issues, please privately message IEL Webinars 2, and we will assist you to the best of our ability. This webinar is being recorded, so we will share that information out with you post this event, but just let us know if you're having any difficulties. In addition, the resources from the webinar, such as the PowerPoint, are located in the Files tab, so feel free to download those materials, as well as some additional information on the MICCR project and the district work that we're doing. Finally, we do highly encourage participation. You will note that there's a chat box in the bottom right hand of your screen. This is a forum for you all to ask questions of our presenters, engage in conversations. We found this to be as highly valuable and an interactive space, so we encourage you to engage with us throughout the next hour or so. And now I will turn it over to Scott Solberg to introduce our presenters and our webinar.
Great. Thank you, Livonia. Very excited to have everybody on, and very excited to have 3 organizations that are engaged in project-based learning to be our guests today during the conversation. We're going to start with Barbara Trainor from Exploration Schools. They're going to provide a nice overview of some of the work that they're doing. What we're hoping we'll get out of today's discussion will be looking at the ways in which not only Exploration Schools, but our other guests, which we'll introduce as we go along, how they're each kind of interpreting the project-based learning and implementing. And we want it to become a dialogue. So as Livonia said, we want to use the chat box. After Barbara gives us about a 10-minute introduction to her work, we're going to take 5 minutes for initial discussion, and then after we get through the other 2 presentations, we're going to open up for the broader discussion. So if you have ideas and resources, if things come to mind that can answer some questions as people are chatting, please put that in. We'll record that chat as well along with our recording, and we'll make sure that when people come in, they can all get access to those resources that you've shared. So it really is an interaction. Unfortunately, we don't use the phone on it because with so many people, it's hard sometimes to keep the sound down. But we want you alive and well on this call and an integral part of the process. So Barbara, with that, maybe you could provide us with an introduction to the work you all are, the great work you are all doing, and we are looking forward to hearing all about it.
Excellent. So we're going to be talking about project-based learning as Explo plans and executes it, which is really more of a discovery-type learning through projects than a true PBL or project-based learning model. Oops, I'm having some trouble with, yep, there we go.
Okay, I'll help you with that.
There's a little bit of a delay. So first we need to define what Explo is. Explo is a not-for-profit educational organization providing summer academic enrichment for students entering grades 2 through 12. We've been running programs for over 40 years. When we often think about what we do in our programs, we want to start to try to influence more teachers and more students, and we think in how we believe education can and should be. So we've created things like, this will be our 2nd time running something called Join the Debates, where we partnered this year with PBS. But it's basically a program aimed at getting youth interested in the presidential election through debates. So outside institutions often partner and join with us because they respect how we develop curriculum and train our teachers. So folks are reaching out to us in schools to learn what we do and how we do it. So we've been asked to create things like a STEM program that we're piloting right now in a school, and it's all around paper. We're continuing to do our work with the Summer Collaborative team in Wilmington, Delaware, where they're looking to stem summer learning loss in an underserved population in that area. We've done some work with Sunflower County Freedom Project in rural Mississippi, in addition to other places. Oh, goodness. Okay. So what we believe, which is really what drives our curriculum and what we expect of our teachers, is that all students can benefit from being empowered through discovery learning opportunities. We expect our teachers to create a culture where discovery is the norm. Appropriate risk-taking is expected, and there really isn't a right answer. In a study conducted by the Association of American Colleges and Universities, employers reported that they are concerned about graduates having a range of skills in areas like communication and teamwork, but they didn't really mention content skills. So we know that our students that are in schools now are being prepared for careers that don't exist yet. So the skills that they're looking for are basically those 21st century skills. We focus on collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, and communication. So let's go back to the question, what is project-based learning at Explore? There has to be a reason and a purpose to what students are learning. It's something to hang the concepts on. It's not enough to learn it just to learn it. Project-based learning provides the context for learning the skills and the application of those skills. It essentially mirrors life. It's really difficult to imagine another context other than school where we learn because it's required. As human beings, we have the desire to learn because we're passionate about the topic or we need the information to solve a problem. Project-based learning embeds the learning in a similar context. We have to be thinking about us teaching students how to think, not what to think. And we all know there's a big difference between those two things. Students are perceived in power positions in these role plays and simulations. There's a storyline. There's a need for them to take action, and those decisions that they make, there are consequences for them. Students need each other on a team. We constrain the time so much that there's too much work for one person to be successful. There are specialized roles. Joint decisions need to be made. They need to communicate in order to have all of the information to make a decision. There's teamwork and there's problem solving. And right answers. What we have found is that students who are focused on getting the right answer are less willing to take risks. So we try to make sure that we're not focusing a project or a simulation on a right answer. Think about what we learned from failure and how lack of failure or constant success might become fear-inducing and paralyzing for some students. We need to be teaching them perseverance, how to weigh consequences, how to take appropriate risks. We emphasize that process over the end result, over the product. The teacher's role in these projects is one of facilitator. The teacher needs to be willing to play along with the simulation or the role play. That teacher is going to guide students rather than instruct them to follow a certain recipe in order to be successful. They're going to give the students the gift of failure and allow them the opportunity to learn from it and then try again. So let's speak to how we create the curriculum. We wrap the skills and content in a developmentally appropriate story of some kind to increase engagement. We know that students who are engaged are learning. Curriculum is created around students involving some dilemma or solving some kind of a problem. We create opportunities for student empowerment through assigned roles and, believe it or not, that teacher wait time. So students will always look to the teacher whenever there's a question until they get used to making decisions as a group. If the teacher jumps in, the power is back in the hands of the teacher, and the students are less likely to investigate and discover and problem solve and develop the skills that they need. They'll keep turning to that teacher for direction. So some examples from Explo. If we were going to teach something around scientific inquiry, deductive reasoning, investigation, that kind of thing, it could be taught by direct instruction, where the teacher explains about scientific inquiry, has a teacher-led discussion, and is the one leading the class. It's predictable and has students in the role of passive instead of active learning. What we do is we create a forensic science class where the storyline engages students in the investigation while putting them in charge of how to investigate the crime and sets the stage for learning the content in order to investigate that crime. So there's a crime. It's complete with yellow caution tape and planted evidence. There's a theatrical component here. The students go about collecting evidence and logging it, learning to lift fingerprints, question suspects, use logic and deductive reasoning to eliminate, and then communicate evidence to obtain a warrant. So in the same way, we run mock trial classes where the storyline engages students in writing persuasive arguments so that they create a solid case. They're presented with a case, they're given roles, they need to work collaboratively to prepare their arguments, and then they receive feedback on the trial. We also have them in classes that they run a business. So they learn bookkeeping skills, advertising, persuasive writing and speaking, psychology, but it empowers students to make decisions that will illustrate the same concepts in a more engaging way than what you'd find in a more traditional classroom. We do stock market simulations, and again, they're given this play money that they go out and they invest in this stock market using real prices, and then we will feed them headlines about things that are going on that will impact their investments and give them the opportunities to trade. And then ultimately in the end, they have a final portfolio that they sell. We have industrial design where students are facing various challenges to design something to solve a problem or redesign something that already exists to make a better design. So they design, they prototype, they create proposals, they meet budget constraints on materials, et cetera, et cetera. We actually use learning through projects, starting with our second graders at all of our programs. So our second graders are tasked with projects like design and build a boat that will carry a Lego figure in a wave tank. But when you think about what they have to do in order to complete that task, they have to design, they have to engineer, they have to learn some physics or experiment with it, in addition to those 21st century skills. We have rising fourth and fifth graders working as Secret Service and security. So they're examining blueprints for possible security issues, identifying suspicious behavior, they're working as a team, they're collecting evidence. We have our 6th and 7th graders, among other things, working on disease outbreak. And their job is to find patient zero, find out where that disease began. They're working with a little bit of microbiology, scientific inquiry, deductive reasoning, communication through reports. They're reporting back to the Explo CDC. They're going through emergency management procedures and public service announcements. So it's an exciting way to teach. It's an exciting way for students to learn. There are learning skills that they need as they move forward. But think about how we might train our teachers to execute this. So first we have to speak to who our teachers are. Essentially, they're very talented, very bright college students, college graduates and undergraduates with little to no teaching experience. They work throughout the winter and spring, and they prepare to teach with the mentorship of an experienced educator through a prescribed program. We also set our expectations early. Whatever the mission of the school or organization is, we speak to that, and then we expect it to be transmitted through the project-based learning, and we want that to be true to the mission. We connect everything to the mission and the teacher's responsibility for carrying it out in classes. We engage the teachers in the mission in order to engage students in new ways. We ask them to view teaching through a different lens than what they've experienced in the past. Many of them have only experienced passive learning, so we're teaching them how to create activities and experiences for students where students are the active learners and actually the teacher is stepping back in a facilitator role. And we model this type of learning whenever possible with staff. We really believe that we should walk the walk when we're demonstrating something for them. When the teachers experience this kind of learning, they're better able to execute it or at least embrace its value. Our teachers, we tell them, need to sell the story. If they can't sell that initial storyline, it falls flat. So we have mentors that talk through what that activity will look like and what the teacher's role is in it. They talk about how they'll guide the activity or project without making it teacher-centered and teacher-directed. When they should step into a discussion between students to settle something and when they should watch it play out. We also need to teach them classroom management skills that are different than perhaps what they've learned in the past because there's group work going on and some of the groups may make different decisions that will involve different scenarios as it plays forward. We role play various scenarios of what might happen to increase the comfort level of the teacher. It's risky to teach this way, so getting them to a place of comfort is really important. Thinking through what can go wrong and how they'll adapt can be really soothing to teachers when they try this new form. We also always have mentorship and support while they're teaching. Explo has curriculum advisors observing our classes, coaching teachers, helping them to inhabit their lesson plans throughout the course. So what do we see as a result? What are the outcomes at Explo? what we see are students are engaged in learning, they're collaborating and communicating with peers and the teacher, they're problem solving, they're critically thinking through and weighing decision options and rebounding after failure to try again. Students who are excited to get to class and disappointed when it ends. We also see, we receive feedback from families, and it's often that their child is more excited about learning, more independent and motivated, and that kids wish school was more like Explo. We've actually a few times even had families ask us about opening a school. So we know that students need to be prepared to weigh consequences and make decisions. They need to be able to collaborate with peers and clearly communicate, think critically and problem solve to enter professions of any kind. So learning how to do this early on can only pave the way while empowering them to trust themselves and really become more independent thinkers.
All right. Barbara, thank you. That was great. I want people to use the chat box if you have some questions. We have a couple of minutes before we move over to Dwayne Edwards from PENSOLE to introduce his program that he has going on. It sounds like you're getting some exciting results. How are you involved with districts? Is it something that they co-create with you, or do you create a program and then it goes out to schools?
So the only program we have so far is the one that's in kind of an alpha test mode that we created. We had a teacher who worked for us previously approach us and say, I need this STEM program, I need something, and I know Explo can create this.
Okay.
So we created a program that now he is implementing in his school and having great success. It's an all-girl school, and the kids are so excited about the engineering projects that they're doing, and they're working with very low-risk, low-cost materials. It all revolves around paper.
Right.
So right now he's helping us fine-tune it, but we created it, and then now he's telling us how do we make this better to fit into a school situation in his school.
Right. And then are you going to be looking at any ways to connect it to, obviously you're engaging students in learning. They're getting excited about learning. Are you going to link it up to some of the student outcomes in terms of their academic performance or test scores or anything?
We haven't as yet because it doesn't necessarily fit the standards as such. What they're getting out of that is something that is pretty much outside of the standards. So it's those 21st century skills that don't always find their way into district standards. So we haven't really thought yet, but we hope to moving forward to try to link that to academic achievement.
Okay. So the focus is really not on learning science or learning the STEM. It's around just learning those 21st century skills through a STEM activity.
Well, it's actually a combination of both. Because they are able to, but it's in that discovery mode, so they're building something, finding out that doesn't work, trying something new, so they're coming to the decision that actually, if I use paper in this way, I can actually support, I want to say hundreds of pounds that they were able to support in a structure, and it was the mechanics of how it was built.
Right.
So, yep, it's a combination.
So there are two questions from the audience. The first is in line with where we are. Are there ways to measure success through assessments with project-based learning? I know that they're not primarily used at Explo, but are there ways to do that with that current structure?
And I have actually done that. I was a public school teacher for many years, and I had actually done that in my math class. Instead of an exam, I gave them an authentic assessment where it was project-based, and they had to build a town using geometric shapes and using centimeter grid paper and folding it in various ways, and I was able to assess my content standards in that way, but it was through the project.
Great. And it also seems like, if you're trying to build collaboration skills and problem solving and risk taking, that it would be possible to have parents and teachers kind of assess the students prior to beginning the project and then seeing if there's any improvement along those dimensions.
Well, and I think too that it, you have the project, and then they might jump back into a more standardized curriculum, and you'll see. I would anticipate that the results of the project-based learning would play out in the curriculum that's going to be taught next.
Right.
So you have to be careful where you place the project so that it feeds into the next unit that's coming up.
All right.
Just one more question. Barb, can you just tell us a little bit more about where you host the Expo session?
Oh, sure. Our 2nd through 7th graders are at Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts. Our rising 8th and 9th graders are at Wellesley College in Wellesley, Massachusetts. And then our high school students, 10 through 12, are at Yale University.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks for asking some questions. We're going to move on to our next presenter. Dwayne Edwards is the founder of the PENSOLE program, and we're excited to hear about the work you're doing, Dwayne. So why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So first, let me say, if you hear some banging in the background, they're building a new hotel right next door to me, so it's a little loud in here sometimes. So forgive the noise if you hear any. First of all, thank you, Barbara. That was a great presentation, and for someone who's not a classically trained educator, I'm glad to hear that I'm kind of on the right path with the program that you have, which is great. I'm traditionally a classically trained designer, so after a 23-year career in the footwear industry, I decided to leave the industry and start an academy specifically catered towards identifying and developing talent for careers that traditionally, kids don't know they can actually go to college to actually to study and then later on get a job in. And that's a little bit of the kind of hidden part of my industry is it's so insular that people tend to just get in through knowing people or through other kind of resources, through educational opportunities, but there was nothing directly pipeline oriented. So we created PENSOLE to do that. I call it a more professional development academy with the focus on footwear. We work with well over about 30 different countries, companies, and over 100 plus colleges. And now we just a few years ago we started working with high schools nationwide. And the program that we'll talk about today is a program that we did and we launched actually in 2013 in Boston with MIT. And so the program, I'll quickly give you a background of kind of what we do, and then we'll roll into a video, and then I can take questions from there. Is what we do is we start backwards. So we start at the end, meaning we start at the actual job, and then we look for opportunities to go backwards to see how can you get to that point. And our industry obviously is footwear. We looked at footwear and looked at specifically the product creation process to emphasize, okay, what is that career track and what are those jobs? From there, we looked at companies that were based in Boston. So we worked with Converse, Reebok, Puma, New Balance in a store called Bodega. And we had a few people from Nike come in as well. And then we started to look at the careers, not only the actual jobs, but then finding people that were physically doing those jobs at each of those companies. So the career focus in the product creation track is product marketing, design, product development, sales, a retail buyer, and then brand marketing and advertising. These people touch the product from an idea all the way to the point where it gets to the store. So we want to create that exact same experience that happens in a corporate environment through an educational setting. So we partnered with MIT. So we're housed there. The first thing we did was have an open house, and we brought all the mentors in, and we brought in about a good 250 students, introduced them to the different careers, and we had a selection process. And they had to earn the right to be a part of the program. Similar to the way they would compete for a job, we want to put them in the same type of pressure scenario that they will receive when trying to apply for a job. From that point on, we established a curriculum. It's a learn by doing curriculum where it's actual real-time project and an actual real-time process. So we gave the students 10 working days to complete the process from an idea to the finished sketch or finished design. And this video kind of gives you a recap of kind of how the program is. This video was shot by the students, so we engage the students to interact and be involved in the entire process. So the video that you see, it does that. And throughout the program, the students obviously learn the actual career job, the career opportunity that they're looking to gain more awareness in, but they also learn personal development skills such as personal branding, cleaning up their social media, developing their own website, developing their own resumes. Accountability was huge. We started at 9 a.m., similar to a regular job. If our students were late, they did push-ups every minute they were late. Just getting them to understand that there's consequences for their actions, as well as we had daily nutritional things that we want to stimulate them, where every day we did positive quotes, we introduced new books, introduced to new websites, as well as people, creative and positive people. Every day we want to fill them with information that is on a positive nature, because a lot of these kids on a daily basis receive negative information. So we want to make sure they start their day off right, so when that day happens, they're fully focused and engaged throughout the entire process. The last piece that I'll cover before we get to the video, and I'm sure there will be some questions after that, is on the professional development side. We clearly established teams, roles, accountability. They had to put together their own schedules, calendars, budgets, similar things that you were talking about in your previous presentation. Our curriculum is based around kind of teaching up, meaning we're teaching them what it takes to be a professional. So we're treating them like a professional, not as a high school student or a college student. We're preparing them for that next step. And that is basically daily expectations, communication, daily presentations, really getting them to get out of their comfort zone and communicate and talk. Along the way, obviously there's mentors that's working with them daily, but at the same time, they also become mentors for their teammates, which that was a really good transformation that we encouraged and we saw develop naturally. So we can roll into the video. So the video kind of gives you a recap of this particular program we did with MIT. But they never see who works on that product. They never see what it took to make that product show up at the door, step at their favorite store. And once they saw the process, I think the engagement of them generally being interested in the topic, it became more of a passion project than less of, oh, I got to do a class project. Yeah. Where I think it has something to do with the topic itself, of finding topics that the kids are naturally interested in, that then they receive the learning a lot, they digest it a lot quicker, and then they're more emotionally invested into it. Where that's the thing that we found is just the students really just did not know. And like I said, my industry doesn't do a very good job of making those types of things available to the kids to know what it takes to get into the industry or what jobs are available within those industries.
No, it's exciting. And two themes that you brought in. One is when they rose to the level of expectations that you set. And so, you mentioned that this is a job environment, it's a work environment, and they were ready to rise up to those expectations. And as you're seeing, there's a lot of talented youth that really do want to get into this kind of area, and industrial design and the whole process of creating and being an entrepreneur and starting things. It's just a great opportunity to help tap into that natural. You mentioned that you're working with MIT on this in the Boston area. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. So the idea is the footwear industry, about 80% of it rests in about 5 states. That's Oregon, Massachusetts, California, New York, and Michigan. And both from a revenue point of view, that's where the majority of the revenue comes from, but that's also where the majority of the companies reside as well, with Boston being the second largest of the 5 states.
Okay. Great. And so how is connecting with the university facilitating the process?
It puts the students in a university setting so they can understand what that next step looks like when it's time to graduate from high school and get into a university, as well as the resources that are available, especially at a school like MIT. It also furthers the just their personal growth and development. But at the same time, a lot of the students did a lot of outside work as well when they have to go visit the individual companies, and so they can physically see the actual work environment with job shadows and then process of how they go about creating product. both real-time pitches, like they were presenting their work to the actual people who worked at the companies, as well as to consumers, gaining consumer insights. It was really an immersion process for them, where there was a level of expectation for them to be responsible to go out and report back to their teams, because each of them had a different role. So that was an interesting dynamic where there was a certain level of accountability put on each of them individually to collectively come back and give presentations on how to proceed to the next step.
And then are you working with a single school, or are you collecting individuals from different schools to come to the university? How does that operate?
It was multiple schools.
Okay.
Yeah, it was students from multiple schools. So we had an open submission process. We had, I believe, over 300 kids registered for the program, and we selected 30 of them.
Wow.
And
wow. Andrea and Brian are going to be talking with us from the Boston Day and Evening Academy about their project. I've looked at their PowerPoint. They've got a lot of extensive information that links to competency-based issues, individualized learning plans, portfolios, all kinds of exciting stuff. So, Andrea and Brian, why don't you guys take it away and give us an overview of your work?
Hi, thanks so much for having us here. We're very excited to be part of this this webinar and this work. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of the school before turning it over to Brian here. Boston Day and Evening Academy is a student-centered, competency-based high school for students in Boston public schools who've not experienced success in traditional classrooms. So we offer classes from 9 to 6 to 380 students, all of whom are at least 2 years behind grade level and with various degrees of social and emotional challenges. 100% of our students live at or below the poverty level. 15% are homeless. 30% are reading at the 3rd grade level when they enroll here. We enroll students 3 times a year. We graduate students 4 times a year. And Brian will talk more about the challenges of not just addressing our students' learning gaps, but moving them through challenging and engaging curriculum to graduation and beyond.
Hey, hi everyone. So I can get control of the slides here. There we go. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview first of what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about essentially what competency-based education looks like. And it's not directly related to project-based learning, but it actually allows our teachers to integrate project-based learning in a way that sort of maintains rigor, and it's kind of an easier way to track what students are actually learning. So it's a nice, authentic way to integrate that with all of the other stuff that we do. And then we're going to talk about our Real Institute, which is how we train other schools how to do what we do. So the competency-based education is really just one piece of what we do. If you look at this slide, you can see there's elements of college and career readiness, postgraduate planning. We have a huge student support element, and we spend a lot of time and effort with our professional learning community and school culture so that we can make this work happen. So our competency-based model, just to compare it really quickly to a traditional model, we place our students in courses based on what they know already. We do an extensive diagnostic process of intake versus a traditional model where students are placed in courses based on how old they are or the fact that they're in 9th grade or 10th grade, which may or may not actually say what they know. Our courses are 10 or 11 weeks, so if a student has a hard time over the course of one course, if they need to repeat it, they're not repeating an entire year, they're repeating just a 10-week course. Versus the traditional model of traditional school, students are in a class for an entire year. Students show mastery of specific competencies and benchmarks before advancing to the next course, and that's really the crux of competency-based education. It's about what you know, versus in a traditional model, you get a grade based on essentially how you perform and whether you do all of the things that you're supposed to do, like turning in homework and behaving and participating and all of that stuff. So competency-based is really about, do you know this, yes or no, and then how well you know it determines your rating. And at our school, if the course is incomplete, students can just pick up where they left off. So if they finish half of the course over a 10-week term, then they can just finish the other half as soon as they repeat the course. Versus if you fail The 9th grade, you have to repeat an entire year of school in a traditional model. So this is just a quick glance at our individualized learning plan. So this is all of the benchmarks. This represents all of the benchmarks that we cover. What you're looking at right here is just the math screen. So you can see each one of those boxes represents different math benchmarks. And I've expanded one coursework. So you can see the Geometry 1 course. And if you look at those orange boxes, those represent a competent rating. The green boxes represent a highly competent rating. And the section that's below kind of talks about what each one of those benchmarks or standards actually looks like. So really quickly to just tie this into project-based learning. So this is how we measure success in doing projects. So if you look at those first couple benchmarks, they say measure accurately using the U.S. customary system and metric system, estimate accurately, identify, describe, compare, and model two-dimensional figures. So you can imagine students doing that just if I give them a piece of paper and a ruler and I say, please measure these things, and I can give them a test. But I could also actually create a project around that. So in the past, we've had projects where we've actually built our school library with wood and saws and rulers and pencils. So students actually had to measure and estimate accurately to do that, to plan on the building. We recently had a group do a quilting project. So they designed and learned to sew. They designed a quilt and learned to sew it together, and then they actually put it together. We also had projects where they made little thingamabobs out of little wooden things. And we actually had another group build a theater set for a play that was working. And they all were able to earn those same benchmarks, 1A, 1B, and 1C. So just to give you a sense of how this, solar power.
Hydroponic greenhouse.
Oh my goodness, I forgot about our hydroponic greenhouse. We built a greenhouse outside. Again, using these same benchmarks, we were able to assess students on how well they knew those things. And then they eventually accumulate those benchmarks, and then they get a grade for that class, a rating for that class. So just what this looks like in the classroom. So every class has a list of essential knowledge and skills that the students must demonstrate. Again, that's what you just saw in our ILP. And that scope and sequence is dictated by our department. It's Common Core aligned. Then in the classroom, teachers are responsible for making the student learning expectations and their progress transparent. So this is the things that teachers do, the tracking systems, the charts, the graphic organizers that let students know what they have left to do, the rubrics, all of that stuff. We create consistent thresholds for competence across the departments, and those are calibrated. We do regular looking at student work protocols to make sure we all have the same idea about what we want out of our students. We emphasize the primacy of mastery of skills and knowledge by removing behavior and attendance. This is what I mentioned a couple slides ago. So these are in our syllabi, our grading practices. We want to give students grades, ratings based on what they know, not how they're performing and whether they're complying to the things that we want them to do. So hopefully you can see that this opens up to a lot of different pedagogies. So we definitely do project-based learning. We also have opportunities to do active learning. We use technology-supported practices when we can. And we're open to kind of trying whatever we can, and this system actually allows us to do that. Just to give you an idea, this is how our students progress through our courses. So that one that I just showed you was in the math row, GO1. So you can see the students' roadmap. They have a competent rating in that class. And once they've earned other benchmarks, they get credit for these other classes. If you look at the EX boxes, those are exemptions. We'll give students credit when they enter the school based on their diagnostics, based on their previous schoolwork, from their transcripts, and then we kind of move students along as they complete our courses. And I should maybe just skip the PGP part, Andrea, because we're kind of running tight on time. Okay. So we're going to talk now. I'm going to hand this over to Andrea. We're going to talk about our Real Institute.
Okay. So that was pretty quick. One of the things that I did want to mention actually on this last slide about the competencies is that students earn these ratings of competent, basic competent, and highly competent based on demonstrating the competencies multiple times independently and using the correct vocabulary. So the multiple times aspect of it really, again, feeds into the project-based nature of the work. We also have a 1-month annual project month, which happens in December. It's between trimesters 1 and 2. At that point, all of what we call our traditional classes end, and teachers pair up and do cross-curricular projects. Students sign up for those projects based on their interest level and based on benchmarks that they need that are assigned to that particular project. And those are the ways that we produce things like the solar-powered hydroponic greenhouse and rocketry and sculptures in the garden and things like that, that are then carried into future courses. So, for instance, the rocketry project-based program from last year's project month is now happening in our math classes. So we were asked to talk a little bit about our REAL program, and I'm just going to zoom right through this because it looks like we've got 38 seconds left. REAL is sorry, let me start that again. There's been a lot of interest in our model, and not just for at-risk students, but as a way of increasing depth of knowledge and interest and competency-based learning for students who are also on track. So what we decided to do was to put it together into a comprehensive into workshops that run for 4 days. The Real Intensive is a 4-day workshop that goes over with our participants the meaning of competence and how we develop assessments, how to build competencies and benchmarks, understanding the roles and scopes of sequence for curriculum and instruction. And everybody who comes to the Real Intensive in the summer leaves with a plan. We encourage people to come in teams. It's possible we've had people come as individuals who are interested in adopting or adapting competency-based work for their classrooms, but and that's actually gone very successfully. But we really encourage people to come in groups so that when they go back to their school, to their districts, they have the luxury of being able to discuss all of what is going to work within their schools with members of the team who have come to Real with them. This is just a quick overview of the things that we do cover during the intensive. Again, as Dwayne was talking about, we sort of backwards plan. What do you want your students to know when they graduate? And that helps build the competencies from that basic premise. What kinds of assessments are going to work with your students? What does differentiated instruction look like in a competency-based classroom? How do we ensure that students are always at the center of our decision-making? It's important, especially for our population of students, that we be trauma-sensitive. Sorry about that. Because so many of our students come from situations where they have significant social and emotional challenges, and then how do educators consistently meet students where they are and give them the space, the respect, the supports, and the tools they need to not just earn a diploma, but graduate with a viable plan for the future. We followed this up with a second week called To Real. People who have come to our original intensive go back, work on their plans, and actually begin implementation. So this is more of a coaching model for teams that want to delve a little bit deeper into actually designing rubrics, designing assessments, designing cognitively demanding assessments, and talking about relevant, engaging curriculum that does incorporate project-based learning. And we have just added a 1-day data reel, which I'm going to turn over to Brian again really quickly.
Yeah. So, and I know we're a little over, so I'm going to be super fast. But essentially, doing this system, this competency-based system, is different than a traditional system, and so it's super important that we can look at data in a way that supports our work, and we've had to get very good at it because we haven't had an out-of-the-box student information system that we could use to do any of this work. So our data reel, just to give you like a 30-second summary of what we're doing, is we're going to be sharing with people our data practices, how to collect data consistently and uniformly, how do you organize it, how do you clean it up, and then how do you analyze it in a way that, that supports the work that you're doing. So we've got a slide that just kind of talks about our process, which is essentially the data inquiry cycle. We ask questions. All of our process is question-based. We make sure we're collecting good data, and we have a system that we've developed to do that. We do analysis. Sometimes that leads us to more questions, and sometimes that leads us to make changes, which we do sort of mindfully, slowly, incrementally with a representative body of people from the school, our ILT, to make the changes, and then we reflect and adjust. And so I've got some examples of some different things we've done, but I think we've gone over time. So why don't we, if it's okay, Scott and Levine, maybe we should wrap up now and then open up for questions.
Okay, great. So, you know, one of the big questions that comes up, David Harris has a question. We'll get to that in just a second. But one of the questions that comes up is, of course, evaluating outcomes. And since you've got such a focus on the competencies, my curiosity is things like SAT scores, ACT scores. You know, how are they passing the AccuPlacers and the other testing as they come in to take algebra in college, things like that? Do you have some of the outcome data on the success of how this is working?
Yeah, we do have data, and I can pull it up and maybe send it out to folks if they need it. You know, it's tricky because our population is coming in pretty far behind already. So we're actually doing a good amount of remediation as well as you know, just getting students through their high school requirements. So all of our students do pass MCAS. We do have, you know, all of our students that go to college, and I think it's 80% of our graduates go to some form of college when they get done. So they are definitely taking their SATs and ACTs. They're definitely taking the AccuPlacer. It's, you know, it's a mixed bag. Some students go in and they do place into algebra, into, you know, college-ready classes, and then there's still plenty that don't. And I think that's just, you know, the nature of where our students are coming from and in our population.
Okay, great. So David was asking how you accommodate different students needing to work on different competencies at a given time. So you've got a lot of very you know, individualized instruction that has to happen. How does that get coordinated, and what does it look like on the ground?
Yeah, that is like the million-dollar question. That's you know, that's the most challenging part of wrapping your head around how to do competency-based well. And I think that we at BDEA are just in the last few years really starting to do that in a much more authentic way. So if you have to balance between allowing students to do the thing that they need to do individually in order to earn whatever credits they need to earn and earn whatever benchmarks they need to earn, and actually having a classroom environment. So a lot of our teachers try to design experiences and activities and projects that everybody in the room can engage in for part of their instructional time, for part of the learning time, and then they also try to design assignments and assessments and even just like organize how they're structuring their work time so that students can get the individual credit they need. So one really simple example is one of our humanities teachers, they do reading responses, and so they read a book together in class, they do the class discussions that you and I did when we were in our, you know, traditional English classes. And then at the end of the day, every day, the students, no matter where they are in the book, no matter what they're reading, they write a reading response. And through those reading responses, they have the opportunity to earn credit for, I think it's like 8 benchmarks that they're kind of covering in that one class. And if they show over the course of reading that book that they know how to ask predictive questions 6 times in those reading responses, then they earn credit that way. So you can see that that still allows for classroom discussion. It still allows for all the meaningful group collaborative work that you would do in a classroom, but then also allows students to kind of work individually at their own pace.
Okay. And then one question I have about it as well is so how are you engaged in career development activities? It seems like a competency-based part of it, but are you helping them identify goals and different career opportunities that would then align with those learning objectives
Yeah.
get to?
Absolutely. We really did not address our comprehensive postgraduate planning pathway that underlines all of the work that our students do from the moment they come into our orientation, which is 1 week prior to the beginning of class. In their first trimester, which is called seminar, all students are required to take a course called Beyond BDEA, and that's when they are first asked, and sometimes for the first time in their lives, what are you going to do after you graduate? You know, are you thinking about college? Are you thinking about a career? What exactly is it that you've been dreaming about? And in many cases, it's the first time they've been allowed to dream. So we take that information. They're also beginning to build skill. We bring that, we scaffold that through the enrichment classes that we offer that include career readiness, through job readiness. We do have somebody on staff who helps connect students with careers and with jobs. They then go into their capstone, their pre-cap trimester, and into capstone, where again the focus is doing a presentation that is connected with what they want to do after they leave. And we have a transition year coordinator who follows students for a year after they've left BDEA into either career or college to continue to maintain that support that they need. We're also in September starting our first early college program in conjunction with Benjamin Franklin Institute of Technology, because we have 3 main career pathways that most students tend to identify: nursing, criminal justice in the law, and technology, whether it be automotive technology or coding. So that link with BFIT is going to be really interesting, and we're going to pilot it and then hope to build on it with other partners.
Okay. So great. So I mean, today we've had 3 very different ways of looking at project-based learning, and as you said, in terms of this, of our last one, it's not the traditional fit within it, but it certainly has elements of the project-based learning components. And it's interesting because yours is much more of a comprehensive model for really supporting the academic and college and career readiness components that students need. In our first 2, we have very specific kinds of work-based learning opportunities. In the first case, helping to build the 21st century skills, but then in the second, really building workforce skills around becoming entrepreneurial, understanding how the design process works for different things that they have in their daily life, in this case with shoes and other things like that. And it's very exciting to see the different complement of ways in which project-based learning can work. I want to thank you all. We're right near the end of the time here, and I'm not sure, I don't see any other questions from our group. I want to thank everyone for coming on today and giving a great synopsis of your work. As you see, everyone has access to the PowerPoint, and so you can follow up with the organizations if you have questions or interested in some of the pieces that they're doing. And we look forward to hearing more about the work as it unfolds in the future. Livonia, did you have any closing thoughts or questions or comments?
I simply wanted to echo your remarks and thank you all for presenting today and for your participation in this webinar. We will have another webinar in June. We will send out more information in the future, but again, thank you for being with us.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Have a good week.